This week's episode of Bizzong is brought to you by Beers and Fears Flight Night. There's a hot new brewery in town, and tonight is opening night. Fear Brewing is a love letter to the horror genre, but when horror bellies up to the bar, the real fun begins. The customers are in for a twisted sequel they'll never forget, if they survive. It's 5 o'clock somewhere, but here it's always just after midnight, so come, have a drink. Just don't stay too long, because here, there is no last call. Beers and Fears Flight Night consists of 4 interconnected novellas by Chuck Buda, Frank Edler, Tim Meyer, and Armand Rosamilia. Available in paperback and Kindle ebook.
The following podcast is a presentation of Project Entertainment Network.
Bizzong.
Bizzong.
Bizzong. Bizzong. Bizzong.
Bizzong. Bizzong. Bizzong. Bizzong. Bizzong. Bizzong.
This is Bizzong, the weird and wacky fiction podcast. With me, your host, Mr. Frank. What's going on, Zongers? How's your week been? Feels like quite a while since we last convened, but we're back once again, doing the do here on the Big Bizzong Show. This week, we've got a return guest. It's been a while, but man, I love this dude, and we've got a lot to catch up on. I'm talking about Sam Richard from Weirdpunk Books making his return here. He's going to talk to us about his new book, Sabbath of the Fox Devils, and in addition to that, he's going to tell us what's been going on over at Weirdpunk Books. As you know, earlier this year, we had on Joe Quinnell, who was the first standalone release for Weirdpunk Books with their book, Mud Ballad. And that was followed up with Sam Richard's own book, The Sabbath of the Fox Devils. And now there's some new stuff about to come out as well. Lots of really cool stuff going on over there. Weirdpunk is taking on a new direction, new focus. And Sam is really, really excited. And he gets me excited about what they're doing over there. It's going to be a lot of fun coming from Weirdpunk Books soon. But you don't need me to tell you that. Let's get into the Bizzong interview of the one, the only, Sam Richard. Give us the gong. It is my pleasure to welcome back to Bizzong this week the man, the myth, the legend, the brains behind Weirdpunk Books and books of his own, the one, the only Mr. Sam Richard. Sam, welcome back to Bizzong.
Thank you so much, Mr. Frank. Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure. Happy to be on again.
The man who came out with the G.G. Allen anthology, a literary tribute to G.G. Allen, is always welcome on Bizzong each and every time.
I'm never going to outlive that one with you, am I?
No, you shouldn't. That is, you made your mark with that book, my friend.
Well, proud to have it.
Yeah, right. If you might as well own it. You did it. You might as well own it.
100%.
100%. Great. It's a great anthology. Everybody go buy another copy because it's just so good.
Yeah,
but
please.
That's old news. You've got a ton of new news for us. Where do we start? Why don't we start with you and a recent release you've come out. Tell us about your recent release.
Yeah, I put out my debut novella, I guess, right? Like my only other solo book was a short story collection.
Right.
It's Wall on Ash and Other Sorrows. But yeah, so my debut novella, Sabbath of the Fox Devils, came out, I don't know, like a couple months ago, I think. I know time doesn't make any sense right now. But yeah, it's I initially started writing it I had the idea kind of bubbling for a long time, for a couple of years, but I initially started writing it in one of Garrett Cook's novella workshops, like his horror novella workshop. And an early unfinished draft of it that he read, he told me that it felt like a splatterpunk take on a Goosebumps book. So that's kind of how I pitch it to people, is it's like it's a coming of age horror story, but like as written by someone, like me, someone who likes to write that splattery stuff too. So yeah, it's all good fun.
Isn't it nice when somebody gives you that ready-made pitch? Isn't that like the hard part of like, what's the book about? And you're like, I don't know. It's just a book about. And so when somebody else can tell you, boil it down for you, and you're like, yeah, that's what it is. It's that splatterpunk meets meets the Goosebumps stuff, and we'll go with that.
Yeah, no, it's really, it's fascinating because it's like I never would have. It is exactly that, but I never would have thought to frame it that way.
Right.
And it is very nice that he said that, and that I have now told everyone. Like anytime I talk about it or write about it, you know, it's like that's kind of the linchpin for the marketing on it is like, yeah, that's an easy, digestible way to explain instead of, oh, well, it's about this kid and blah, blah, blah. It's like, yeah, no, it's just a small creature horror movie, but a book that's a splatterpunk book and a Goosebumps book.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about, yeah, I mean, for me personally, like trying to boil that stuff down is so difficult. Like, you know, what's your style? You know, Stephen King meets this, or this book is, you know, the splatterpunk meets, I don't do well with that. So I kind of throw things out there and wait to get some feedback, and then you know, kind of take it from there, and like, oh, you read like this author, that I'm like, yeah, okay, we'll go with that. I'm like that guy, and then so the next person comes along, yeah, I'm like that guy. That guy just told me I'm like this guy, and try to do it from there. And the same with the book. I know a friend of mine, Armand Rosamilia, wrote a book called Green River Blend, and his simple pitch was it's a horror coffee book, and I'm like, that is brilliant. Like, just saying this is a horror coffee book that just sells a book, and I'm like, I need that. I need to have that. And then I came up with the cat coin, and I'm like, it's the story of Bitcoin, but with cats, and all of a sudden it's just like so simple like that. You know, you need that quick boiled down thing, and you've got it with Sabbath of the Fox Devils, Splatterpunk, Goosebumps.
Yeah.
Everybody understands what that is at that point.
Right. Because it's always so hard, like, if you're talking, like, as a writer, right, about the things that maybe have influenced not just a specific work, but, like, the way you write. Those references, those names only exist in a conversation where the other person has read them. Yes. Right? So you can, like, be like, oh, like, I mean, when I would talk about To Wallow in Ash and Other Sorrows, like, a lot of that book is influenced by my love of, I mean, it's obviously influenced by grief and what happened to me with my wife dying, and kind of filtering that through a horror lens, but also through transgressive fiction, which is a big thing that I've been a huge fan of, like, for my whole life. So stuff like Dennis Cooper and George Bataille and Kathy Acker, and then those horror writers that kind of seamlessly blend that into horror, like Kathy Koja. Mm-hmm. And if I talk to people about that and being like, oh, it's like a horror, it's like J.G. Ballard, but horror. Somebody who's never read J.G. Ballard, who doesn't understand that, is like, what? Okay, so is it like Stephen King? You know? So I think that sometimes we get lost in those, like, influence. I know I get lost in those kind of influence comparisons that if people are unaware of, it just kind of doesn't help the sale. It doesn't help the pitch. So having something that's a lot more, like, boiled down to even just, like, know about that, really fucking helps.
And the thing too is, like, for you to say, like, oh yeah, my book is you know, it's splatterpunk on like with the Goosebumps vibe. I don't know, for me to say something like that, to think of my work on a level as Goosebumps, I would never think that way. You know, I would need that to come from somebody else to pick up that vibe, who's less modest about my work and would say that. And then you're like, okay, I'm not saying that I'm writing Goosebumps, but it's got that feel, you know. And it's like you said, the accessibility of, you know, I wasn't trying to write Goosebumps, but everybody understands Goosebumps. They can wrap their head around that one. Yeah, exactly.
That is. So basically, like, the kind of the story is about a kid, like a early teenager. The setting is kind of 80s satanic panic era, and all that stuff's very real and in this small town, and he's kind of grappling with this really extreme religious faith that he lives within and is part of this family unit, and struggling with like, is this real? Do I believe in this? And all of these things that I've been told are evil. Are they evil? Like, he can't read comic books. He can't watch cartoons. And so the story is kind of him, like, the long and short of it is him kind of grappling with that by way of finding a ancient grimoire in his public library, because of course that stuff exists in a kind of satanic panic realm, and summoning a bunch of fox devils who then wreak havoc and kind of change things for maybe the better, maybe the worse.
Can the book be considered like YA, given this content of the story, and even the looking at the cover now, it sort of has that fairy tale children's book sort of vibe to the the artwork on it?
Yeah, I wouldn't say so. I mean, like, the splatterpunk element is really real.
Yeah.
It's very gory. There's some really intense bloodshed in it that's I don't like. You never really get to look away from it. I think in a way it deals with like a lot of kind of adult themes, like about identity and finding yourself, which I guess could, those are also in YA fiction, but I think they're kind of approached from a more adult vantage point. I don't imagine many kids would enjoy it.
Right, yeah. So if a mom comes up to your table, checks it out, says, my son really likes foxes. Would he enjoy it? You said it's like Goosebumps. Would you sell her the book?
I mean, if she wants to buy it, yeah. I mean, I'll sell anybody a book.
That's cool. No, that's cool.
But
you never know. Didn't, like, when you were a kid. I know when I was.
Go ahead.
I know when I was a kid, like, even, I'm 12, 13, I'm picking up my first Stephen King book, and I'm like, ooh, it says the word fuck, and there's a titty in the book, and you felt real dirty and everything, shit your mom wouldn't have fucking let you read, but you felt, you felt a little cool reading it, but so maybe if they, you'd let that 12-year-old kid read it, and he's like, oh man, there's a lot of blood in this thing. I won't tell my mom about that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, maybe. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I'd sell anybody the book, and yeah, I think when I pitch it, I have to be careful to like overemphasize the splatterpunk part and underemphasize the Goosebumps part.
Of course, being the Weirdpunk books and everything, I'm sure it's not like you're at the children's section of the Barnes and Noble, sitting there signing books or anything like that. Your audience probably isn't frequently young children where you would necessarily worry about that.
Right. Yeah. It's not. You don't get a ton of kids coming to the weird writer conventions or the horror conventions. You get some at the horror conventions, but
yeah,
I've done a couple just like local book. Like I know you do the thing, the Beers and Fears thing.
Yeah.
And I've done a couple kind of similar. I have a writer friend who started doing a very similar thing like that here, but it's like all 20 writers of all varieties who are local, all each tabling at a brewery or a cider place or whatever, like a local, and try to get people in and buy books from all of us, all these local writers. And so a couple of those I've definitely had like, oh, there's like definitely kids here, there's definitely families here, and a lot of times they're the ones who just like walk right by my table and don't stop. But occasionally they do stop, and they really like the artwork.
Right. Yeah, it sort of captures their imaginations. And then you're like, well, $10, kiddo, and it's yours.
Yes, exactly. No qualms. I will sell this to you, but you got to pony up that money, kid.
Now, you put out Sabbath of the Fox Devils through Weirdpunk Books. Was that the easiest route to get this out? And you're already set up to publish books, so we're gonna go that way. Or had you considered shopping it around?
Yeah, I shopped it around a little bit. I had at one point 4 different presses potentially looking at it. And ultimately, I think one rejected it, and the rest I just pulled before they got a chance to read it. And they're all presses who like great presses who I'd love to work with in the future. But there's something about this book for me, and I think this might just be a a me issue, where I like really wanted to have that level of like hands-on control with every aspect of it.
Yeah.
I wanted to like be the person getting like communicating with, deciding who the artist was and then communicating with them. I wanted to do the layout, the internal layout, because I love that stuff. I wanted to hire Don Noble to do the other aspects of the jacket. Michael Bukowski did the cover art and the front text, and then I hired Don to do the rest. And I kind of like knew exactly what I wanted, and I felt like I was going to be a little disappointed if it wasn't exactly that. And so to kind of quell my own anxiety about dealing with other people dealing with that and dealing with me being like, I know exactly what I fucking want. I was just like, I'm starting with the press, like I'm starting to do novellas anyhow. I had already was in the works for Joe Quinnell's The Mud Ballad. Like that was mostly done at that point.
Right.
And that was the first novella release. And I was like, I'm just going to make this the second and just kind of save everybody, myself included, a bunch of grief and just be that hands-on with myself and it'll be fine. Again, like it was a lot of presses who I would love to work with in the future. And I felt kind of bad being like, read my book, but okay, no, don't read my book. But I don't know how, like with you doing publishing yourself too, like there is something really powerful about being like, I'm making all of the decisions here on my own.
Yeah. I mean, that is big. And I think for me, as opposed to you, it's a little different because you have the Weirdpunk Books Press, it's got a reputation as a publisher. And so you putting out your own work, it's like everybody kind of understands what you bring to the table anyway, and they're going to understand that, you're definitely going to bring that, at least that level, if not more, to your own book. So it's not like I would never, consider it a vanity like press move. I mean, it just, the press, Weirdpunk Books, has a reputation, and you are, for all intents and purposes, Weirdpunk. So as opposed to me, I'm just impatient maybe to the process, but there is a complete attraction to having all, like, I get the say on the cover and I get the say on the layout, and maybe I don't do the best layouts, but I've learned each and every time more and more to make each successive book I put out look good. But oftentimes it is like, I mean, we see it constantly, these presses falling apart for various reasons, and you're like, thank God I don't have to deal with that shit, Just recently a press fell apart, had all these books, and now there's a glut of books back in the market. They got to find new homes, and and it's thank God I don't have to go through that. I don't have to go through any of these weird things of where you'd have to call people out for not getting paid and all that. And I don't know if it's the exception and not the rule, but I mean, it seems far more prevalent in the indie press markets for that type of thing to happen. So but that being said, like right now I'm on the course of like the next thing the thing after the thing I'm writing now. I'm gonna shop around, and I want to. I know I'm doing myself a disservice by not working with some presses and getting myself a bigger readership, bigger presence, just by the, if I were to get on Weirdpunk Books, you have a far bigger readership that doesn't know who I am than does. So it's a new avenue. And so right now I am doing my homework. I'm making my short list. Who hasn't fucked up yet? Who hasn't, had stuff said about them? Who looks like they're doing good work? Who looks like they're solid, stable, isn't getting carried away. And when the time comes to shop around, hopefully I've got a good list, and you just got to pull the trigger, because I don't know, because it isn't, a rarity that these things happen. Everybody goes through it, and it's maybe just part of the process, unfortunately.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's kind of an inherent power to doing that, spreading. It sounds kind of weird, but spreading yourself around or spreading your work around. Yeah. Like doing kind of multiple things, like still publishing yourself, but also having books out there with small presses or traditional publishers. I think you can maintain like deep control of most of your work, but then also have other stuff that's kind of might get more eyes on it, and then hopefully will bring more readers to your back catalog and what else you're publishing, as yourself.
Yeah, that's a big thing. You know, the other thing I've noticed too, writing this thing now that it, is my intention to shop it around, is that, usually when I write, it's like, well, fuck it, I'm gonna put this on. I don't care what it is. I wrote fucking Catcoin, for crying out loud. I don't give a shit. But there's I'm paying more mind to, like, I have to try and sell this book, so. I'm kind of writing a little differently too. I'm not like trying to be James Patterson or anything about things, but there is that in the back of my mind, like, I have to try and sell this. So the writing styles is a tad bit weird. I don't know if you've found that for yourself too, but even though ultimately you put it out yourself, you still had the intention of shopping it around.
Yeah, I don't know that yeah. I think I just kind of do exactly what I do and then hope for the best.
Well, that's that punk rock sensibility that you have there. But I mean, when you write, do you is it in the back of your mind every time, like, I am going to shop this around in some form or another?
I think it kind of changes as I work on a piece. Usually I'll, like, because I'm a very visual person too. Like, I love art, I love aesthetics, and that's part of, like, the Weirdpunk thing, is that I like putting out books that are, like, really good looking, at least to my eye.
Yeah.
Like, I hire artists who do really good work and do really cool stuff. And so when I'm writing a book, I'm usually also thinking about how I want it to look. And I think I'm at a point now where, when I'm thinking about, like, should I submit this to a small press or even a bigger press potentially, or should I just publish it through Weirdpunk? Part of my thought process is, how important is the exact nuance of how this cover will look to me. Yeah. And if I have, like, a really specific kind of hard line idea of what I want it to look like, I'm much more prone to be like, fuck it, I'm going to publish it myself. If it's something that's like, oh, this is, like, cool and I'd love to see it in the world, but I'm kind of more open to how it could be presented, or, like, maybe, specific artists I would have wanted to have do the art for it might be out of reach financially in terms of the budget that a small press might have for a book cover for a author who will sell some but not a ton of copies. That's kind of a consideration I have. And if it's not in that sphere where I'm like, somebody who's maybe not going to be super expensive and whatever, they can do a good cover for sure, like, I'll let somebody else do it. I'll submit it around. But I think I'm also like you in a way where waiting really sucks. And, like, and even I say this as a publisher who has currently an inbox with a couple of books to read for consideration, that one of which has been there for maybe a month and a half. Yeah. But it's like, I'm doing other publishing stuff, so I don't super have time. But, like, I hate that part of it. I can, like, a short story is fine. I can submit a short story and wait the amount of time and fine. But you're talking those kind of novella length works or a short story collection or something where you're like, you put so much time and so much of yourself into it. I want that payoff sooner than, oh, it's going to take us 6 months to a year to even read it. And then if we like it, we'll put it on the 2023 schedule.
Yeah. Yeah. That is
like 2023, I'll be a different writer than I am right now.
Yeah. And then trying to, I always think about those people, especially, when they're getting into the bigger publishers where they have been 4 or 5 years removed from writing a book, and then they got to do these press tours, and they're like, how can you talk about it? I can barely talk about the book I wrote 6 months ago. I'm on the thing I'm on now. and to have that, to do that is rough. And yeah, I mean, there is that like, we're in the digital age of publishing. What am I waiting for? It's so easy, and I mean, you do have to do your due diligence. If you put out garbage, nobody's going to pick up your second book or your third book. That's garbage, and leave it alone. So you do have to do it no matter who you are. And as long as you're doing that, God, it's so easy. So, I mean, I can't blame you for, for, getting antsy about that. I know I feel that too. And it's, I mean, especially in your case where it's not even like you have your whole press set up. You've got your artist, you got your layout, like, and you do a lot of, like, so you're already DIYing it yourself. Why not DIY for you too? It makes 100% perfect sense.
Yeah. Yeah, that was sort of ended up kind of being my rationalization, because I did feel like, I don't want to like ride the coattails of the press, like you said, like I want to make sure that my art is like up to snuff on the level of the kind of stuff that Weirdpunk puts out, that I hope the press is known for. I don't know how other people feel about it. I'm really proud of the books we've put out, but I want to make sure that I'm not just like, oh, just put another book out because I can, because, I want to care about the book as much as I care about somebody else's release. I want to be as invested and go through the same kind of editorial processes. It's a little different because it's not me and someone else. It's just me. But I want to make sure that like you said, the due diligence of making sure it looks good, it reads clean, it's not full of errors, or it's not a story that doesn't make sense, or I'm just done with it, fuck it, publish it. I really want to make sure that I don't do that. So kind of my model for it, with determining like, okay, I'm going to start publishing at least some of my own stuff under Weirdpunk, was I thought a lot about Anderson Prunty and Atlatl and CV and Grindhouse, and how they do that. They seem to, they're both amazing fucking writers who run incredible presses. Like, I love both those presses.
Yes.
I think they're both top form writers in the scene, just incredible writers. And so I thought a lot about, like, if I'm going to do this, I guess that model seems to work for them, where they can go to table in an event, and they're not necessarily tabling as themselves, but they're tabling as Grindhouse or Atlatl or both, but then they're also as themselves within that.
Yes. And
kind of figuring out that marketing has been something, it's been a little tricky for me, but I think that model and how they both approach it seems like really smart and works really well for them. So I'm like, fuck it, why can't I do that too? Not that I'm saying I'm as good a writer as either of them, because they're both fucking amazing, but hopefully one day.
You can only try, but you hit it on the nose there. They are the model for like publishing yourself under your own imprint, and nobody ever questions that. Nobody says, she published her own stuff, because the quality, like you said, the quality of their work, quality of their writing it's pretty unimpeachable, and so everybody knows they would get their stories published anywhere. They don't they don't need to shop their stuff around. Everybody knows their reputation precedes them, and it works really well. And like you said too, it's not, nobody ever thinks of Grindhouse as like, oh yeah, that's CV Hunt's Vanity Press, or Atlatl is Anderson Prunty. Nobody ever looks at them that way. They are their press first, and their books happen to be there, and they represent themselves as their press first, and their books happen to be in the catalog. And yeah, you're exactly correct in trying to model after them. It's a really good approach, and you too have the same reputation that you've built up for Weirdpunk books, where nobody's going to question, oh, it's just Sam Richard, a way to get his own books out. It's not that. You've put out tons of books before that. You were very smart too, whether it was planned or not, to put out Joe Quinnell's book first as the first standalone book, the first novella for Weirdpunk books, and you didn't lead with your own too. That probably had a good look for things, as it were. And then, you put Joe out there in front in case it all fails. She'd be like, well, she screwed it up. but it has all worked out well. I don't, was that sort of the plan? Like, was that in the back of your mind? Like, I can't lead with my book.
I don't think I really super thought it through that much. I know last time I was on Bizzong, I talked a little bit about, like, I had this idea that maybe I would eventually do novellas and single author works, but kind of a little still on the fence at that point about not sure. And it was really, Joe is like a very good friend of mine, like one of my favorite people. And they sent me the Mud Ballad to beta read, because we read each other's stuff. Like, they're part of a small little group of friends where we try to read each other's stuff and give critique and feedback. And they were actually considering trying to submit it to Grindhouse. And I read it, and I just went, I want to publish this. Uh-huh. And so that then, because of that, became the first Weirdpunk novella. And so I asked that, I was like, hey, and apparently I don't super remember saying this. Apparently I said, I don't know that this is right for Grindhouse, but I'd like to publish it. Like, I'm sure Grindhouse would have published it now. I'm like, I didn't mean to like undercut my pitch to get it. Like, be like, just let me do it. Save yourself some grief. But I just loved that book so much that I went like, if I'm going to do this, this is the book I'm going to do this with.
You knew, you knew immediately that was completely representative of a weird punk book.
Yeah. I mean, it just felt exactly like one of the kind of directions I want to pull the press, and that book is fucking awesome. And so while I was working on that, then I kind of had the like, fuck, like, I'm just gonna do Sabbath of the Fox Devils too, and then if I'm gonna do that too, then that means I definitely have to start publishing other novellas that aren't just mine.
You're in it now.
Yeah. Now it's like, because it just, I don't want it to be that thing where it's like Weirdpunk is only a horse that works for me. Like, I want it to work for a bunch of awesome writers,
Yeah, and I imagine, I mean, the time you put into it, obviously you're probably putting in more time with other writers anyway, so,
Yeah.
I mean, it seems to me like, at least now, like you're sort of the publisher first, the author second. Would that be fair to say?
Probably, yeah. I mean, just even in terms of my, like, the amount of time I end up writing, in a week, which isn't very much right now. Part of that is just because like life is so weird, but it's been really easy to dive into the kind of the more technical aspects of doing other people's books than it has to make the time and the emotional energy to write. So for sure right now it's definitely leaning more towards publishing than being my own writer. But I would like to try to find a better balance of those two things and be able to like do them both.
Yeah. Have you felt your workload increase now that you have decided to take on the novellas?
Yeah, for sure. To some degree, I do a thing. Maybe it's not a very fair thing to do to all the other writers out there in the world. So sorry, y'all. You can call me a bastard. I don't care. But I do a thing where I don't, because it's just me, I don't open for general submissions.
Right.
I generally, when I'm thinking about like, okay, I can schedule, I think I want to try to fit one, maybe two more releases in or whatever in the next year, however it goes. I make posts on social media, like on both Weirdpunk and my personal like Twitter and Facebook pages, just being like, writers, if you have a novella, I'm not doing short story collections right now. I'm not really doing novels, like just novellas, because they're kind of easier beasts to tame as an editor. If you have a novella kind of between 20 and 40,000 words, and it's finished, and send me, you think it might be a good fit, send me a pitch on it. And then like specifically, like, you tell me about the story, but also I'm really interested in like tone and atmosphere and influences, and kind of those aspects are more than just what the story is, are more likely for me to like bite or not. Like if you say that it's like a I don't know, fucking crazy body horror thing that blends with I don't know, like existential dread, I'm like, okay, send me that story, like I'll read it. If it kind of fits within the things that I really enjoy, I'm more prone to give it the time and read it. So I try to only have like a small submission box, like just a few in there that then I try to read as quickly as I can. And so I have a couple people out there who like are working on things to hopefully submit to me. They said they would, because I think there's so much different kind of weird fiction and horror that I know that I don't want to publish at all. I want to publish kind of certain flavors of it that really speak to me. Mm-hmm. So just as a publisher, I do feel a little bad that I don't do the open subs, but like I can't read 50 novellas. It's just not going to happen. So I'll read like 7.
I don't think you should feel bad about that at all, because to me that makes perfect sense. I always hear those, the publisher say, hey, it's open call, and after the first day I got 500 manuscripts in my mailbox, and now we got to slug through these piles. It's going to take months to go through. I mean, your method seems brilliant because you're just taking the elevator pitches and if it speaks to me or not, because I imagine all any publisher does when they get that just mountain for the slush pile is they're kind of reading the first paragraph or two, and 99% of the time, nope, and that's it. And they're just basing it off of those, that's what they teach you in any kind of writing thing you do is like, you got to hook them. You got to hook them in the first paragraph. And so, it's getting wasted like that. So I think you're just economizing the whole process by going like, just give me the pitch. Just tell me it's Splatterpunk meets Goosebumps, and I might buy it. But you cut out a lot of work, and because I gotta imagine it's overwhelming just to see that much in your email box and know that you have to just pick your way through that many submissions, and you're like, hey, do you got something? Just tell me what it is, and take it from there. And it's so much less pressure on you, particularly. And so it's not like you've got a whole staff, so you're doing a lot of the work yourself. And it makes perfect sense for me. I don't think you should feel bad. I would feel more confident submitting to you under that, process, instead of like worrying that I'm going to get buried under 500, manuscripts. And have to deal with somebody who's just angry that they have a giant pile to get through in the day.
Yeah, I think I appreciate hearing that, because I was, like I said, I feel a little bad just like also as a writer, having done the pitch, submitted things. But yeah, it's kind of a lesson learned from specifically when Brendan and I edited the New Flesh, the Cronenberg tribute anthology, because that was, like 3 times the amount of submissions a Weirdpunk Call had received.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we received 200, and I know that some anthologies receive 1,000, so I know this isn't crazy, but we received 200 submissions for that.
Yeah.
And if the average, I did the math on that, if the average story that we received was about 4,000 words, which is probably right, we read 800,000 words of Cronenberg submissions, which is like longer than the Bible, I think. And that kind of broke my brain for a little while, because I would realize that, like, I would try to read multiple in a day, obviously, because we were trying to make sure we were quick about our acceptance and rejection process. And I would try to read, and at a certain point it would like stop, my eyes would stop taking it in, really. Like, yeah. Not just the words, but like how the story is constructed and all the kind of other things you're looking at when you're reading any kind of story. And so I think based off that experience, I went like, I don't want to get that kind of brain fatigue. I don't want to do that to myself, because it's not fun, and I want to enjoy reading. So if I can pare my submission pile down to, in general, the kinds of things that I would want to read based on what I'm told about them, again, that doesn't necessarily mean I'll accept it. It really depends on how the book feels, how much I relate to it and like it or enjoy it or whatever. But I just thought that was like a more sane process than as literally one person trying to read through that many submissions. And so far, I think it's worked pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like, just like I said, it's on you in particular, less stress. Because I imagine, like, with the New Flesh, you have this love of Cronenberg, you want to do an anthology and get stories inspired by him, and then you might find yourself at the end of that process hating body horror, hating Stephen Cronenberg and everything he stood for, just because you had to go through this mountain of stuff. And obviously, when you get 200 plus submissions, a lot of it, I'm sure, gets repetitive, and you're like, oh, again. And it like you said, it's a fatigue. It's got to wear on you. So, I mean, it makes all the sense in the world for me to approach it the way you are now.
Yeah, good. Yeah, I hope so. It's working for me, at least. And that's, there was another thing with like taking over Weirdpunk and deciding to do novellas and all these kind of changes that the press has had over the past 2 years or so, 3 years or so. Like, one of the things is like, what's going to keep me engaged?
Right.
What's going to keep this being something that I'm going to continue to do and not start to be like, I'd just really rather write, because like I mean, so many small presses, it's hard work, and I think it's really easy to burn out, and it's really easy to, and like no shade to anybody who's stopped running a small press or kind of it's fallen to the wayside for a period of time, because it's a lot of fucking work.
Yeah.
And I like want to make sure that it's something that's sustainable for me as just like a one person business, as a one person press.
Yeah, I mean that makes all the sense in the world, and you're right. You see it all the time. People just they get excited, they jump into it, and then they realize it's a lot of work, and they ultimately let a lot of people down. But I mean, if you know how to pump the brakes and work at a pace that's comfortable for you, that you're not gonna burn yourself out, you can make that sustain. You can make that last, and I mean, as long as you have that love for the work and promoting it and showing people, you essentially you're like showing people, look at these, I love these stories, I want the world to see these stories, and you're trying to present that all in the best light. I mean, that's just this like the most heartfelt duty of a publisher if they're doing it, and as long as you're not like one of the big five where it's just the whole thing is to make money. But that's the rule you're serving. So as long as you don't lose the love of doing it, you can sustain that, and as long as you got to be smart about it a little bit, and that's seems to be what you're doing, especially now that you've moved into the novella room. Do you still foresee doing some more anthologies, or are there anthologies sort of brewing in your mind or that are on the table yet?
There's anthologies are really hard. They're very expensive.
Yeah.
I mean, like, just as a publisher, I refuse to pay less than a penny a word. If I had more money, I would love to pay more than a penny a word. But like anything under a penny a word, just for me, like as the publisher, feels like not great, not like super ethical move.
Right.
So when you're doing that and you're putting out anthologies, like they end up costing a lot to buy those stories, and then to get the art, and then to get the contributor copies out and all that stuff. It ends up being like a significant chunk of change, and that and how much work it takes to just produce one book are kind of moved me into like the thinking about doing novellas. Every once in a while I think like maybe I'd do another anthology, but like in a while. Although I am currently involved in, like, Weirdpunk will be publishing, hopefully before the end of the year, if not like the very beginning of next year, like a super secret mini anthology project that I can't really talk super a lot about, but it's me and 4 other friends who have been or are involved in various Weirdpunk releases. The kind of we were thinking along the lines of what Joe and Katie Michelle Quinn and I did with Ira Rat and Laser Mall.
Yeah.
We were just thinking, like, between that and the King Shot Press Bleak Friday mini anthology, I was thinking about like something like that. It's more digestible, like 5 short stories. Like we're doing a royalty split, so it's not going to cost me like on the front paying out, for each story. We're like literally just doing a straight 5-way. Like Weirdpunk isn't taking an extra cut or anything. It's like just a 5-way split, all incoming money, so we can all just get a little bump from that, and that way it just keeps costs low on my end. But again, it's super secret, but there'll be more to come in the future about it. But that's kind of the dipping the toes back into the anthology waters. I really like that. Like, I'm not seeking stories. I'm seeking people I know who are good writers to write stories with like a specific theme in mind, like a less specific theme than something like G.G. Allen or the Misfits or David Cronenberg, but just like a kind of theme that we can all write a story around and then publish that, and all collect on the money together.
I mean,
again, just keeping things a little more sane for me.
for me, you could have just stopped at like where you want to do something like the Laser Mole again, because that, I mean, oh my God, I picked that up right away just off of hearing what it was. And man, I thoroughly enjoyed that, and getting that Filthy Loot sort of zine vibe from it was fantastic. So to hear a project like that might be coming, from Weirdpunk Books in the future, That's got me excited. You didn't have to tell me much more than that, because that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I talked to Ira the other day. Like we talk fairly often, and I was telling him a little bit about it, but I was like, dude, I'm not trying to steal your thunder here. And he said that he was thinking about doing another project kind of like, in that same vein too. And he was like, yeah, I don't know. I don't want to steal the thunder away from Laser Mall or feel like I'm stepping on your toes. I was like, dude, it's your press. Like, do whatever you want. And like, doing more of that stuff will just make that a thing that more people are aware of and see. And then hopefully that means they'll like look into the other times that people have done that and they'll buy Laser Mall.
Right. Or to expand on that, like, since that worked so well and everybody had fun doing it, like, and I've heard nothing but good things from those who read it. Like maybe we need this, and maybe Filthy Loot alone cannot fill this void. Maybe we need to take a look at that from the Weirdpunk books angle, even though like you're all kind of in bed together making these projects. So, but like maybe it's a thing that needs to start happening, like a movement that, it doesn't really exist a lot now. And there's a need for it out there. So you can both participate in that, and you're not stealing each other's idea. It's just, you're both running with an idea that works really well.
Yeah. I just think it's like, it's nice to have a thing that's like, here's a physical object. It's a book. It looks nice. It's got cool stories in it, but it's not 200 pages. It's like a more digestible, like short bursts of, not that it's microfiction or something. They're just fully fleshed short stories, but just like these bursts of these stories, but it doesn't get over long. That's a thing. Like, I love, like, again, the Cronenberg anthology was super fun to work on. And Brendan and I, one of my best friends, like, love that guy, had a blast. The thing was at least 10,000 words longer, if not 15, than I wanted it to be.
Yeah.
Just because we got so many quality submissions that we reached a point where we like couldn't say no to any of them.
Yeah.
And that's really cool, but it made the book kind of big, and then it's like, oh, maybe like sitting down and as a reader, sitting down and reading through this, it can become a bit repetitive when you have these similar, it's like another kind of Cronenberg-y body horror thing, or another like shadowy organization, and then there's some body horror, and so I was thinking about how to do these kind of anthologies but not have that fatigue set in. It's like, it's only 5 stories or 6 stories or 3 stories, and they're cheaper to produce, so they're cheaper to sell, and you can blast through them, and you're like, that was a fun thing, and I don't know, it's not the whole to-do of like, it's 250 pages.
Yeah, no, there's even going back all the way to the G.G. Allen literary tribute, like, your first impression is like, how many fucking stories about a guy throwing his shit can we tell? And, I was surprised, delightfully surprised to see that, like, well, you can tell a lot of different G.G. Allen stories very differently, and no two were alike. So that was pleasant. But to your point, doing that time and again, well, let's do it again with the Misfits. Let's do it again with Cronenberg. Like, yeah, it's a lot quicker. It's a lot easier, probably more pleasurable to do something like Laser Mall, where it's like 4 stories, 3 stories, 5 stories, whatever it's going to be, but just a quick burst, not beating you over the head with it. Everybody has fun with it. And you said, like, even, behind the scenes, the business of it is a lot less complicated. It seems to make a ton of sense. I know I was hoping for another Laser Mall, because after reading that, like, of course I had to go back and watch Chopping Mall again. And I realized everybody missed a thing. Like, the real horror of it, I think, is that there were malls with carpeting inside. I would totally write a Laser Mall horror story about the carpet, the dust in it of a million people, and I that still blows me away. That was like the first thing I honed back in on after I watched it, and God knows how many years. I was like, oh my God, there were carpets in malls years and years ago. I forgot about that. So, and that was the other cool thing. Like, I think just about everybody who partook in that really were like 80s mall kids, and you still pulled off 80s mall kids stories authentically, which was really cool to see happen.
Yeah, I think I was the only 80s mall kid involved.
Yeah, you got on the edge there. You just snuck in. But yeah, I mean, it was great.
I think, so with this kind of secret project mini anthology, just like with Laser Mall, part of the appeal of doing that like format is also that it's really it's more collaborative than a larger than a kind of traditional anthology, right? Where you like even with I mean The New Flesh was collaborative because Brendan and I co-edited it.
Yeah.
But you're still, when you're talking about writers, it's like you make a submission call and you get submissions and you read through them and then you decide which ones you like the most. And then you still collaborate with those writers on editing it and getting it all shored up and like looking as pretty as possible. But with these, with Laser Mall and the secret mini anthology Weirdpunk project, it's like talking to a few friends and being like, let's do this thing.
Yeah.
Let's each write a story on this theme within this word count parameter. You know, I think like maxing out at 6,000 words or something, kind of 4 to 6 is the sweet spot.
Yeah.
And each do our own thing on that. And then let's read each other's, like everybody involved reads each other's and gives whatever criticism or feedback or notes. And you can bounce like, oh, I'm struggling with this part of, you know, where I am in the story. Can you look at it and give me some feedback where you think I can fix this or shore this up? And then it gets a final kind of edit polish when those are all done. And it's all done on that level as like almost this, even though it's everybody's own stories, it's just a more collaborative experience than your traditional anthology release. And I think that's honestly one of the biggest draws for me, is to just be like, I'm going to work on a weird little fun thing with a bunch of my friends who are super talented.
Right.
And like, not to love about doing that. That's like what, you know, as writers, right, we're so isolated. We do our thing kind of in our own darkness with our beverages of choice. And to be able to still do that, but in another sense, be collaborating without crossing those stories is like a really fun, cool thing.
I understand that completely, because as you're describing what you want to do, I realize it's what I have already done with the Beers and Fears books. We put out 2 now.
Right.
And it's just the 4 of us, you know, getting together and we kind of round table and sit around and we got this idea. The first one was like, let's, you know, make it an old haunted brewery and we'll tell tales from the brewery. And then it's like, go. And you know, our process was like, you know, you write the first story and then you submit that in, we'll all read it, and you're going to go second, you're going to go third, and we just bounce off of each person's story and roll it into like a fully fleshed out thing. But like you said, it's the 4 of us collaborating on it. It's you know, there's informality to it. It's not like all professional business, like, and you have tons of fun with it, and you hope that it comes across that way, which you know, the stuff like the Laser Mall, stuff like I did the Beers and Fears book, you can tell that there's a lot of fun in those words.
Yeah, I remembered that those books. I forgot that that's what you did too, and I it's so cool. It's just like, fuck, I just like even talking about it, even though I'm already planning on doing this project and have the friends lined up to do it. But I'm like, I just fucking want to keep doing this shit. It's just such a good time.
Let's move up the timeline on this. It sounds so awesome. But yeah, no, it's and the work you have to put into it, it's so much less. So it's a lot easier for you as a publisher as well to get it all done. And I mean, it seems like a no-brainer. Lots of fun. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, I like kind of when they're all done, another just like I go over them and do kind of a lacquer editing, make sure everything's cleaned up, and then like I love to internal format, so I just do that too and get some fucking rad cover art. It's like all my favorite parts of doing publishing all right there, and then also getting to write and do cool stuff with friends.
So does this mean now that Weirdpunk Books has already moved away from novellas and you're only going to do these mini collaborations from here on out?
No. I mean, we'll see what next year.
You're not saying no.
Yeah, not yet. There's actually, I've got 2 more novellas that have been announced coming out later this year. The first is Roland Blackburn's 17 Names for Skin. He was part of the New Bizarre Author series, I think 2 years ago, the Flesh Molder's Love Song. and he apparently was at BizarroCon at least one of the years that I went. But I mean, there's a lot of drinking. I can't say for sure if I met him. I think I very briefly met him, which is really funny because now we've been like working on this book together. But it's a really cool kind of like very punk rock body horror story.
Love the title.
And yeah, 17 Names for Skin it's perfect. It's such a good title. And so that's all fully edited, and I'm waiting for Don Noble to get back to me with some cover art. We've already talked about it and everything. So once that's done, I can get that proof print ready. So I mean, I was saying end of summer, kind of depends on, I don't know what print times are like right now. When we did the Mud Ballad and Sabbath of the Fox Devils, print times were like 22 days. I think just because social distancing at the print facilities makes
that was sort of
less
like the thick of the ramp up then.
Yeah, I'm not sure what it looks like right now, but that made Sabbath of the Fox Devils take longer. So I kind of pushed this out to be like, if it happens by the end of the summer, we'll consider it a success, just in case that print time takes longer. So that's the next thing. And then following that, thinking like end of fall, early winter, but again, it'll kind of depend, is a novella called The Wingspan of Severed Hands by Joanna Koch. They're a writer from Michigan, and I think their novelette, it's either novella or novelette, was nominated for a Shirley Jackson Award this year. But that's like a body horror meets cosmic horror through the kind of Robert Chambers mythology. It's very human. It's very haunting. It's really beautiful. So I'm super excited for people to read that too, because they're an incredible writer as well.
It sounds like you've got some very interesting novellas that are coming up here in the future, in addition to what the two that you've put out already. Has there been how much consideration have you given to this whole coronavirus situation? You seem to be releasing right through it. You just kind of like, well, we're going to release and what happens, or are you giving some credence? Because obviously you can't get out into the world necessarily face to face to market books.
Yeah, it's definitely been a consideration. The Mud Ballad was slated to come out like right when this all started.
Yeah.
Like this started, and the release date was like another, like the kind of, I don't do like super solid release dates again because there's like printing can take longer, but kind of general time frame was like a couple weeks after this all started. And so I talked to Joe, and I was like, I'm like game to just release it if you're game to just like, but if you want it to wait, I can wait too. It's kind of, and they were like, yeah, let's just do it. Like, it's cool. So we put that out, and then Sabbath of Fox Devils the next month. And it definitely, I feel like the Amazon and Barnes and Noble and like bookshop sales have been probably slower than they would have been, but the direct sales on the Weirdpunk website have been more than I think they normally are. I don't know if there's this trend for people to be buying direct from publishers and writers. If there is, I really like it, but it just seems like more people, and Joe did a lot of like telling their fans and their friends to be like, buy it. Here's the Amazon link, but also here's the Weirdpunk link. Buy it there because I get more money. Weirdpunk gets more money. So that it definitely was a consideration at first, but after we pulled the trigger on both those, it's just like, well, it's just happening. It's just here. And so with these next two books, I definitely, for a brief second, had that thought too. But then I was like, I mean, I don't know. Who knows when things are going to return to normal anyhow? I don't want to keep waiting. I know these writers don't want to keep waiting. We just put them out, and hopefully they'll have a life. I mean, I think they'll have a life, but I'm not like concerned that they won't have any life at all. I think they'll get readers. They'll, connect with people, but hopefully once the Corona things settle down, we'll be able to table again, and some of these will get maybe a new movement from that with actually face-to-face sales with people who wouldn't have seen them online or come across the press anywhere. I don't know. It's hard for me to say that like, so I lost my day job due to
Mhm.
Corona. Like, I got laid off from
Yeah.
the software company that I worked at. And so I think I've also just been like, well, just going to do weird punk a lot, like just going to really focus a lot on that. And like, it's totally fine. And it's doing well. So I think to some degree, just my dedication to continuing to work on it makes me feel like deciding not to put something out would be counterintuitive, just because I'm like, well, I'm like doing all this editing and doing all this formatting like most days. So like, fuck it. Why am I going to wait? I'm already putting in the work right now because I have the time.
Yeah, I mean, by and large, that seems to be most people's approach. I don't know if that's a fact of it's because those people put out books, so they're saying, fuck it. I'm not seeing the books that are getting held back. But it
Right.
doesn't feel like necessarily, I'm sure there are books getting held back. It's probably not as bad as like the movies that are getting held back. You know, it's a different situation.
Yeah.
But you know, there's plenty of big name authors still getting published and small as well. To the point of Joe, when I interviewed Joe earlier when the book came out, and yeah, it was right at that point. I remember asking, like, you know, was there any consideration, and it seemed like, well, just who knows, you know, at that point, who knows what's gonna happen, so fuck it, put it out. And I'm seeing, I you know, I can say, like, in the last few weeks I've seen a number of people sort of like word of mouth building on the Mud Ballad. And so it's like, you know, it may be a slower roll than it would have been, you know, in more normal situation where you would have got those bigger initial numbers. But like you said, it's out there now, and it can get discovered maybe a little more slowly than it would have. But eventually, you know, we'll be able to get back out face to face in the world, and that'll be the real opportunity to connect in that way and recognize that book or those books that you put out now, you know, if they don't quite get the recognition they might normally have had.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think I'm always kind of just I hate to use the term, but like running a business, I'm always more a proponent of that kind of slow, long-term burn than like just a bunch of sales up front and then nothing later. You know, I want the books that I put out to have some kind of shelf life, and like a stable shelf life where people continually find the books. And you know, because I mean, it's a small, like, little DIY punk rock press. Like, I don't have the marketing power of much.
Right.
The
Yeah.
marketing power of a jar full of change. And but like, god damn it, we're doing it. And so if it just like has this kind of word of mouth life where people like new people are discovering it just like over a longer period of time, like, I'm good with that. Like, that's good. That's sustainable, you know, from a incoming money perspective. Like, money longer term, like over a long period of time, is a sustainable thing, as opposed to like, got a bunch of money and no more.
And it's really, really encouraging too that like you're reporting like those direct sales directly through Weird Punk Books and your website are actually doing very well. And I think you're right. I think there's a trend happening there, whether it's a result of social distancing or just something that would have happened anyway, where it just seems like people are more willing to or more wanting to pay the creators directly, be it the author or the publisher as well. I see a lot of people who, I think there was a press actually considering like pulling their books off of Amazon and just completely working off of their own web store, you know, as far as physical books go too. So I mean, it's great to hear that those sales are doing well for you now.
Yeah, it's been really awesome to see that. And like, I mean, I think that anytime we can kind of pull back that stranglehold that Amazon has over our lives in general, but also really specifically publishing and like print on demand publishing and all of that, it seems like, I mean, I know you've been self-publishing long enough that you've kind of seen the amount of money that you get from Amazon selling your book like dwindle over the years. Like, oh, now we're giving you this much less. Now we're giving you this much less. It's just like, fuck you. So anything we can do to be like, no, like, cut that shit, like, buy direct. Like, I don't know. I think if there's any kind of movement towards that, that's nothing but a good thing for all of us.
Yeah. Oh no, definitely. And it's good to see that readers the people spending the money are definitely willing to, it may be a little more difficult. It may take a little more time to get your books, but they're definitely willing to try and get that money directly into the creator's hands.
Absolutely. And it's funny because like now that since I don't have a day job, I go to the post office damn near every day. Like, if I have an order that night, I go or during the day, like I go the next morning. So you're not waiting people ordering from the Weirdpunk store aren't waiting like for me to get to the post office in 5 days. Like it's damn near every day. And I could like, wait till I have a few, but I'm just like, fuck it. It's not that far to drive. Just drop it at the post office and then they'll get their package really quick.
Yeah, I mean, and that's great business because then they know my Weirdpunk books come rather quickly, so I'll probably buy from them again.
Yeah,
I need more books in a pinch, and it might even help too that like I know here where I live in New Jersey, like the libraries have just reopened, so I do probably a quarter of what I read in a year comes out of the library, and for a few months there, I was like, there's a lot of books. Like I would have gone to the library a few times here. Now, like I bought more books, which is encouraging. I bought them through Amazon as ebooks, but I bought more books, just as a result of that. I don't know if that's good or bad. It's not good for my wallet, but good for the writers. So that's a positive.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Sam, it has been fun, man. You've got so much great stuff going on coming up in the future. Of course, your own book. Do you see any releases from you in the near future?
I've been for the past couple years incredibly, horribly, painfully, slowly working on 2 projects that are still, it's sad how short they are still. But I have Clash books, and they want to publish, like we've talked about, publishing a grief memoir for me, like based around my wife dying almost 3 years ago. So I've been working on that, but it's obviously immensely difficult to write. So it's been a very slow process. Hopefully someday soon I can actually get that thing finished. And then I've also been working on a very so Sabbath of the Fox Devils is a little different. Like for people who've read To Wallow in Ash and Other Sorrows, Sabbath of the Fox Devils I was working on before that and then stopped basically to write that short story collection because I kind of needed to write that after Mo died.
Yeah. And
then I came back to it. So it's more, again, it's like more fun. It's got pathos, it's got humanity, it's definitely got some sads in it, but not on the level of the stories in To Wallow in Ash, which are almost all like just bleakly, horrifyingly sad. And so I've been working on this novella that I'm probably about a third of the way through that's just like a horrendously sad horror novella, and kind of like the Widow book and kind of like To Wallow in Ash. It's like just a really difficult thing to write because there's so much of my own emotional where my emotional state kind of tied into it. So those are the 2 big things that I'm working on. And again, they're kind of, because they're slow, it's taken a long time. I'm not really sure when either of those will be released. But hopefully, I mean, I'd love to at least have something come out next year. If I can just get I'd love to be like Jeff O'Brien or, Carlton Mellick, just like having multiple books a year. But I'd be happy being like a 1 solo release a year writer.
Yeah, I mean, you got to do you, right? And you can only do as that much, especially since, you're running a press and to coincide with that too. So you're being pulled in a ton of different directions. So I wouldn't expect you to pump out books like that, just as long as you're pumping out great Weirdpunk books, no matter whose name is on the cover. That's probably the most important thing.
Yeah, that sounds good.
That sounds good. Sam, it's been great catching up with you again. Tons of great stuff going on. It's great to hear, the last time we were talking about where Weirdpunk books might go, and it feels so solid now, that direction. Those things are like, I might do this, I might do that, and now it's really concrete. You definitely have a definite path that you're taking the press on, and it's awesome to hear that journey that it's taken between now and then.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, no, it feels really good, and I really appreciate all your support. You've been a massive cheerleader for the press, so I mean that's meant a lot. And I just hope we can keep cranking out rad shit for people.
I mean, it looks to me like you have no problem whatsoever doing that. And man, I love hearing about even this super secret project. I'm all excited about. I don't know what I'm excited about, but I'm freaking excited about it. So I'm looking forward to it all. Sam Richard. It's been a blast having you on again. And hopefully maybe a year from now, we're going to be talking about what that super secret project is, your new books, and maybe new directions for Weirdpunk Books and all the cool new stuff that you're no doubt going to have in due time.
Well, here's hoping, and thank you so much, Mr. Frank, for having me again. This has been a blast as always. I appreciate it.
The one, the only, Sam Richard. What a great guest. I mean, there is a guy, he's putting in the work, Zongers. He's writing books, constantly writing, still finding time to run a really wicked great press that's dedicated to its authors, to doing the right thing, and Sam is just a super creative force, and he's bringing the world some great books. I mean, what more could you possibly want out of a writer, out of a publisher? I can't think of anything more. So be sure to check out them Weirdpunk books. I mean, you already know those anthologies. He's got that G.G. Allen anthology. He's got the Misfits anthology. He's got that big hit that he had with The New Flesh, the David Cronenberg tribute anthology. I mean, he just kills it with anthologies, and now he's taking on them standalone books, and you can be sure you're going to get top-notch books, stories out of Weirdpunk Books. And he's got them cool, like, collaborative efforts coming too in the future, it sounds like. Just tons and tons of great work coming from Weirdpunk Books. So be sure you check them all out. They got that punk rock spirit behind them. So that's all we've got for you this week, Zongers. Don't forget, Bizzong is available for advertising your product, yourself, or your wares. So feel free to reach out to me, Mr. Frank J. Edler at gmail.com, and inquire about our ridiculously affordable ad rates today. So now you're free to go and listen to these other great Project Entertainment Network podcasts.
Are you so tired of having your own thoughts? Are you just totally exhausted having your own beliefs on every single thing in the entire world?
Well, don't worry. Here at Your New Opinion, we do the thinking for you.
Join Ryan,
Nick,
and Ben
as the boys debate topics that we probably know nothing about, using every dirty trick they can think of to win.
Everything from if net neutrality is good or bad, to cake versus pie, to who killed JFK.
So if you're looking to never have your own thoughts again, check out Your New Opinion every Friday.
This has been a presentation of the Project Entertainment Network.